So today we're gonna continue working with Python. So we're gonna cover some things about list methods, Lambda functions, try, except, error handling. So yeah, we'll see a bunch of new functionality and kind of what is it called? Compare Python to JavaScript and some of the things. Okay, so one of the things that was mentioned yesterday was something called a switch case. So switch cases are pretty much an alternative way to write like a lot of else if statements. So if, let's say we have we want to get input from a user and we want to ask them let's say, what's your favorite programming language? And then based on this input, we want to output a certain message. So normally we would have if lang equals, let's say, Python, then, oops, you can print, you can do data stuff with that. And then we can have else if language equals JavaScript. I'll just write out JavaScript. And we can you can do front end. And so on, and then you have a bunch of other ones, and then else, that's your base case. You can print all languages are as a string. Cool. Anyways, something like that. So some people prefer to have this, they want to have the conditions and stuff like that, but all of these conditions are pretty much the same. We're just checking this this variable against certain keywords. So an alternative to this is something called a switch case, and you can it's denoted by two keywords. So it's going to be match and case. So the way you write this is match lang. So you want to match this variable to different cases. So in the case that it is Python, we want to print this out. In the case that it is JavaScript, oops, we want to print this out, and so on. And then to show a default case, you do case and then underscore. And then we can print out this. And so if we want to run this, I'm just going to comment this out. Where's my terminal? Okay, so let's say my favorite language is Python. You can do data stuff with that. If I run it again, I just hit enter. That will default to this case, and it'll say that. Any questions on this? This is just kind of like a helpful thing to know.
You're saying this is like a switch? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's no return or break. It just does one of the cases.
Exactly.
You don't need a default, like, or would that last case be the equivalent of default, like in JavaScript?
Yes, yes. This would be the equivalent of default. It's also the equivalent of else. So if none of these cases match, then it will automatically go into here. Any other questions on this? Okay.
You can have multiple outputs from that, right? Like, so for each case, you could have it run different lines of code underneath.
For sure, for sure. You can do some math. Yeah, whatever you want to do with it. Oops, it's my 4 minus 4. And then you can print X. Which one is this? There we go. So yeah, you can write as much in it as you want. You can call other functions, just regular code.
I have a question, but can you put any logic within the case name?
In here. No, it
Yes.
usually matches. Actually, you might be able to. What's it? Python match case. Less than, I don't know. Yeah, you can have multiple cases. Actually, well, I'll get back to that. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah, Adam's going to look it up.
Yeah.
So
I will get.
we'll get back to you on that. Any other questions? Yeah, Joe.
If you remove, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, if you remove the print statement under case Python,
Yeah.
does that work the same as if you hit Python or JavaScript? Then it will do all of the cases under JavaScript, or is that not working?
No, so I think you can do, I don't think you can do a case within a case. Yeah, it doesn't like, let me see.
Okay, I was just asking because I know in, I think C++, if you like have cases on top of each other, they'll do the same thing.
No, so for this one, you can't put them on top of each other, but I believe you can put Python or Python with a capital P.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think you can do this. Should or not. Or I don't know.
You can, it's in brackets, it's the ones that are list.
Okay.
If you
Is it like parentheses or square brackets?
square brackets.
Okay,
Yeah, I was just looking
Yeah.
that up.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, you can have a list of possible outputs that you're expecting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that, can folks hear me? I think that to answer the question about case, I think it's really with Python, the match case statement is more about pattern matching. So if you don't have to pattern match with a string, like if the variable you're looking at is integer, you could match for integer values and you could match for booleans. I'm not 100%, but I don't think you can put logic inside, like in the case statement itself, the way you might with JavaScript. Because again, with Python, the term is pattern matching. The idea is that there is a pattern or value, and the match case statement is comparing the case against the match to see if they're the same.
Yeah. This one didn't work. We will unless I misspelled anything, but yeah, we'll try it out with the multiple ones. I'll look it up a little bit. But yeah, Kenneth, yeah.
That kind of just answered my question. But I find myself in a lot of times in which I feel like the match cases would work. But from your experience, what typically do you see programmers using this for?
So I use it if I am, I guess in this kind of like this scenario, if I'm getting input from someone and let's say I have like a menu that I need the user to input like a menu item number, and then I can go into a different function that handles that. I personally would choose like a match case syntax versus if else statement. I guess, I mean, they do the same thing. It's just, I feel like it looks cleaner and it makes a little more sense and it's less code to write. Okay. Any other questions?
So it doesn't just have to be a string, it can be a number, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
And is it just best practice to indent it, or can it all be in one line?
No, it has to be indented. So similar to everything in like the functions, if statements, for loops, stuff like that, anything within this has to be indented. So if you see a colon, the one after should be indented and this will belong to this.
Yeah, Python is a bit of a special language in that indentation matters, which actually makes life a bit easier because everything stays readable and Python runtime throws an error if something isn't indented right.
Yeah, Joe.
So with what Adam said about not being able to use logic in the cases, you couldn't do something like case the character J in Lang. If you're looking for like a word that starts with J or has J in it, you'd have to match the specific input.
I think so. I think they're yeah, we might need to do a little more Googling on that one. Ah, there we go. Thank you, Ben. So it's an or, so you can put the pipe, which is shift and then the key right above your enter or return. This can give you like an either or. I think you can do an and. Yeah, you can do an or, you can do an and. And is the ampersand, but I think you need two of them. No, never mind, you cannot. It might be a caret. No, okay, never mind. Ignore that. Ignore what I just said. But yeah, this pipe works as the or. Good. Yes. Okay. So for one thing that I wanted to mention, this is, so we're done with switch cases, but so in Python, as in the case with a lot of other languages, you have specific keywords and you're not allowed to use those keywords as variable names. So like if I wanted to say continue equals 3, it won't let me do that because continue is a reserved keyword that is to be used within like a certain context. So that's just something that you should keep in mind. Also, it will show up in an exercise today. And yeah, just wanted to point it out. Okay, so that was switch cases. Onto something fun called a Lambda function. So a Lambda function is a temporary unnamed or anonymous for some reason I'm not used to this keyboard yet function. So instead of saying, so we usually define functions like this. So let's say we want to add 1, and we take in a number, and we return x plus 1. So usually you have at least 2 lines. This can be written in 1, but typically there's multiple. And then, so an alternative to this, you can have add 2 equals, so you can set it to a variable if you'd like. And the syntax for this function is lambda, and then you just write whatever, like you write stuff after this. So lambda, you specify your parameter. So let's say I want x to be my parameter, and then what you want to return here is x plus 2. So again, parameter, and then on the other side of the colon, it's the return, similar to this. But the benefit of this will come in a bit. So we'll show some examples, but now if I want to add 2, and I will send in a 7. Oops, I don't want to do this. Okay, so I printed out 9. I'm just going to comment this one out. Should I? I don't know. Okay, I'll just comment it out. It's fine. Oh, that's annoying. Okay. There we go.
Oh, that is annoying.
Okay, if you guys have questions, yeah, please raise your hand or talk, because I'm not checking too much the chat. Oh, I guess Adam is there, never mind. Yeah,
The name of the function, and then lambda is acting as the temporary to where there's like no parameters that, well,
there is a parameter, yeah. So you can have parameters, but you're not defining it as a function. So if I wanted to, I can just put, I don't even have to do this. I can, or no, I do. This is how you can call it. So this will make a little more sense in the next example. So this is used within the context of a few other things. Okay.
So you can have, you can set it to have multiple parameters as well.
Yes.
And so if you set it to multiple parameters, are they, because like when you like make it like a function, sometimes you don't have to put in all the parameters to get the answer. Do you have to put in all parameters to get for lambda to work?
Yeah, so let's test it
Okay.
out. So it's missing one required argument because you defined it with 2. So here, if I put 7 and 2, there we go. So now it works. Yeah, Joe.
Can you chain lambda functions? Like, I don't know why you would use it in this example, but like if you wrote lambda x returns lambda y, which returns x plus y.
Probably. Let's see. I mean, yeah, I mean, for this example specifically, I don't think you should, because it's just you're adding, and yeah, but if you might come across it and you might need it, let's see. So this should give us 14 because it's the same number being sent in. No, it does not.
Okay.
Oh, so it's printing out this, but it's not going into, never seen this. So it's returning a function, the lambda function to this.
Oh, I need to look at the lambda
Yeah.
syntax. Let's see, lambda x. Oh, so the first lambda function that we create returns another function. So if you call add two,
Mhm.
and then call whatever that returns again, that will actually execute the second function.
Okay,
Does
so
that
if I made, like, function equals add to,
Yeah,
okay, so add two, and then I sent in a number 7,
yeah,
and then I said
Yeah.
function of 7,
that should print.
14, okay.
Yeah,
So if I change this to 2, what will happen? Okay, so it's adding, it's just nesting the functions, and one of them returns another function.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's actually, we don't get into it too much in class, but there's a whole style of programming called functional programming, which is where this whole idea of a lambda comes from, which is very similar to the way functions work naturally in JavaScript. Like every function is lambda in JavaScript. If you folks remember from the other day, like first class functions mean we can assign functions to variables. So I think this is called function currying. And like this is, it comes up in certain situations, like because it lets you compose the way functions work. Like if for some reason, like maybe if instead of adding two, we wanted to like put someone's name at the end of every sentence, we could like have one function that like creates the other function that we can now like pass in some sentence that we will stick the name on at the end of. I don't know if that made sense, but I'm 90% sure that what we stumbled onto here is called function currying and is a bit out of scope, but kind of cool.
It's awesome. Kenneth, yeah.
We mentioned that the lambda is anonymous, but when I look at this, it looks like we are in fact giving it a parameter of X. So what exactly is making this anonymous?
It's the fact that you're not defining it. So I think,
I can,
so yeah, I believe it's if you're outside of this file, you won't be able to import this. Is that correct?
it's a couple things. So the parameter, yeah, so it's a little funny, may I? Looking at lambdas is a little funny. Like X here is the name of the first argument that we pass to the lambda. We'll say argument or parameter interchangeably, and here why. You will hear people talk when you get to this point in your career about a function signature. Going back to the idea of like a function from math, which I'm not an expert on, but a function from math, basically it has inputs, it has outputs. If you put in the same inputs, you always get the same output. So a function signature in programming is like the parameters, the arguments, and then the output. So we've got this signature here that it takes this one argument named X. You might even care about the type, but this function doesn't have a name. And that's where the term anonymous comes from. Like here with this function, we define it, it has a name. Like within the Python runtime, that function has a name. Here, this Lambda function does not have a name. I don't know exactly where that pops up, but it can.
Even
then-
though we did give a variable assignment to it, but it's not,
Yeah,
it's unnamed.
exactly. We assign this anonymous unnamed function to a variable, but the function itself has no name, if that makes sense, which I think
It'll
Python
make
is maybe
sense in
easiest
the,
to identify.
yeah, it'll make sense in this next next example.
Yeah, that's a great question, by the way.
Okay, so whatever needs to happen at lambda, it's going to find it wherever that may be and then plug it in and do its thing, kind of.
Yeah, you'll see it in the next example. Let me move on to this one, and then you'll and then you can let me know if it answers your question. Okay, so we have lists. We saw lists yesterday. So let's say this is my list. So there are built-in list methods. One of them is called map. Map is very, very useful. So this is one of the non-destructive methods that it doesn't actually change the list itself, but it returns a new list. So map, and then so map takes in 2 arguments. It will take in a function as its first argument, and then an iterable object, which a list is one of them. So list, you can iterate through it. So our first one, we could either put in a predefined function, but typically a lot of people just create a lambda because they don't want to create a function outside like this, define it, when this is going to be used specifically in this context and only in this context. And maybe you have like a map and you have a few other functions. So not having to like have too much code outside with this helps with that. So let's say lambda, and then I want to take each item, and then I want to say item plus 2. So what this is saying, or let me actually go back. So what map does is it takes every item from the list, and then it creates a new list with the same amount of items, but with something like with some change happening to each item based on your function that you had just inserted. So the function that I wrote will add 2 to every single item here. Maybe it's a list of names and you want to capitalize the first letter of each name. You would use a map. So this is my first argument, which is the function, a lambda function. And then my second argument is going to be my list. Okay, so let's print our new list and see what we get. Let me just clear. There we go. Okay, so we get a map object back. A map object is specifically coming from map. It is a list, but it's a little more specific. So if you want to just do print, you can actually just cast it as a list and everything will work fine, which is great. So now you're able to see all the original numbers just with 2 added to them. I could also multiply them by 2. And now everything's multiplied by 2. Any questions on this?
Yes, really quick. Is that list, so like in JavaScript, it's like the index. So that second one would be the index. Is that what it's doing? Like my list is going by each index?
It's going by each item. So it's we're not actually touching any of the indices. We're grabbing one item. This is the equivalent of saying for item in list or in my list.
So the 2 maps are different versus Python and JavaScript in the sense of like say like A and B, right? In JavaScript, A is like pulling the number and the second B would be the index of that of A. Am I thinking of this right, or am I a little off?
So so with JavaScript, you're able to grab the index. It's like built in to map, or you can just have the item itself. I'm actually going to show an example, or there's a resource that I'm going to show that has examples of the map function, like all these functions that we're going over. There's equivalent ones in JavaScript. So we'll show the difference there. So if I wanted to get the index, I believe I can just enumerate. And then I will get item and, or no, index I think is first. Index and item. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work, but index, let's say plus, oops. Item plus index. required one position. Lambda.
Is you could define the lambda outside the map statement if that would help with the syntax.
Okay. But is it? Hold on. Yeah, I'll get back to this. I'm not sure how to do it with the index. Yeah, you have to do a little extra stuff to make it work with an index. That is my answer.
Oh,
Versus
here, let me-
JavaScript.
Let me see if I can find.
And yeah, so like I said, you have to cast this new list. But if you didn't want to print it out like this, you could just iterate through it like regular. So for X in new list. And it will just work. You can print X. Oops. There we go. Oh. That's interesting. Okay, we'll play around with the enumerate later. Okay. +2. Okay, there we go. Okay. So another one of these functions is filter. If you were you able to find it or?
No, I'm not sure
Okay.
how to do that off the top of my head either. Something with enumerate.
Yeah.
We'll find the right example and we'll throw it in the Slack.
Okay. Okay, so this one creates new list using a function. And then for filter, so filter allows you to create a new list filtering based off of the function that you have in there. So your function has to, your Lambda function or any function that you insert in there has to return true or false. So the Lambda, I'm just gonna do item, oops. So for each item, I want to check, let's say, if I want to make a list of all the numbers that are divisible by 3. That's pretty good or simple. So can someone tell me how to check for if something is divisible by a number?
You can use the modulus, the percentage, divide by 3, and if it's equal to 0, then it's divisible by 3.
Awesome. Perfect. So for anyone who might not be familiar, the modulus returns the remainder from a division. So if something is not equally divisible by a number, it will return non-zero. So if it returns 0, that means like 6 mod 3 will give you 0 because it is divisible by 3. Okay, and then I just put my list. And let's see what our new list is. List, new list. Okay, that seems right. Gave us 3, 6, and 9. So yeah, so the only difference with the filter and the map is that this has to return a true or false statement. So if this equals 0, then it will return that item into the new list. Any questions about this one? Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so another function we have is reduce. So reduce is going to reduce a list into one singular number. So that is typically a like you use it for sum or product or those are the only ones that I can think of right now. But for this one, let's say sum equals. Okay, so for the reduce, we actually have to import a library. Even though it's built in to Python, you have to import func tools, which is just function tools that allow you to use reduce. So this is one way of importing something. So if you say just import func tools, this will import an entire library. You can also say from func tools import reduce. So if you know specifically what method you're going to be using from that library, it is better to import the specific methods, because if the libraries are huge, it will affect your runtime and it'll just pull in a bunch of code that you don't really need. So this is typically better. And if you wanted multiple things from here, you can put comma and then whatever the name of your other function. And I'll go more into depth about like importing and libraries and stuff at the end, like towards the end of this lecture. Okay, so then we have to do, so if I only, let's show you this. So if I only imported func tools here, I would have to say func tools dot reduce, because this is a part of this module. If I did this one instead, I wouldn't have to do this at all. I would just have to say reduce and it will know what it is. So reduce, we create a lambda, and this lambda will take 2 arguments. So it will have an aggregate argument, which is the first one, and then the item in the list. So the aggregate is keeping track of whatever we're trying to produce at the end, and then the item is just the list item. So what I want to do with this is I want to get the sum. So I'm just going to say aggregate plus item, and then I'm just going to use my list. So if I want to print out, I can just print out my sum now, and we'll see what happens. Awesome. So it seems like it added up all the numbers, and I will just trust that it is 55. Any questions on this? Okay. So one more thing is, instead of this lambda function, I could just put a function that is predefined. So if I wanted to do define, I don't know, find sum or compute sum. Compute sum. I know that's the wrong case. I'm using camel case, not snake case.
Yeah, it's that Python JavaScript.
Yep. So I can just say return. So this is going to take an aggregate and an item, and this will just return aggregate plus item. And if I say instead of this lambda, just compute sum, this should do the same thing. There we go. So you can predefine your function, or you can create an actual lambda for it. Yeah. Lewis.
I'm still not unclear what's going on here with the import func tools.
Okay.
Just a func tools and import. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, so library so Python has, I mean, most programming languages have these things called libraries. And libraries or modules are just code that other developers have written previously that help us with what we want to do. Just makes our lives so much easier. So you can just import these libraries. You can import this code that someone else has written, and you can just use the methods that they have written without having to deal with implementing them yourself. So instead of me having to write a reduce function that will handle all of this and go through, like loop through the list, and for each item, I call this function and do stuff like that. It will handle everything for me, and all I have to do is call this function. Also, function and method, we use them interchangeably. They're equivalent words. Same with module. So module is apparently just any file. It's just any file with the .py extension containing Python code that can be imported inside of another, Python file. So if I define this function here, if I'm in another file within here, I can actually import compute sum, which I'm going to show an example of later on. Did that kind of answer your question on the imports? Or no?
I think it did, to be honest. I think I'm just slow. I just don't understand what's going on. But maybe I don't want to stop the lesson, continue, and maybe later we can.
Okay, we'll
talk
see more
about it.
examples on the imports. So for right now, just know that there is some other developer who has written a Python file called Func tools, or a Python library called Func tools, and we are able to import it. And this Func tools library has a function called reduce, and we are just able to use that function because we imported it into this file, my list methods.py file here. Yeah, and then now we can use it. So you can import code from other files into your own file.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool.
And I just wanted to add that we're going to be doing that pretty soon too, where we'll be importing. We might have like two files and then write a function in one and import it into the other.
Yeah.
And to kind of touch on the other day with the discussion in JavaScript about scope and namespacing, I think in Python, it treats each file like a module, where like if you have two files and you have the same variable name in the two files, that doesn't cause a problem. And so importing is the way that we like pull code from one module or file to another.
Yeah. Yeah, Luigi.
Got a quick question. I'm not sure if you covered this already, but how many lines of code can you put on the Lambda function?
That is a good question. I think they might need, let me see. Lambda, I actually don't know how to test this. So X.
I
think it's only one expression that you can put.
You can see if it lets us put stuff below the colon.
Yeah. No. It doesn't, I think it's a one-liner.
What if you add a return statement? Does it?
To here, return. No.
That's a one-liner.
Yeah.
Thank you for trying that.
Of course. Yeah, it likes it to be on the same line. Unless we do this. No.
Yeah.
No.
And if you're writing a Lambda and you want more than one line, that's a good sign that maybe you want to define a named function.
Yep.
In fact, yeah, as a general rule in programming, if you're trying to get the code to do something that it doesn't seem to want to do, that's a good sign that there might be, it's time to use a different tool in the toolbox.
I agree. Yeah, Nick.
I was just wondering if I could get an example of reduce in another context, like not addition. Because I think I'm struggling too with the aggregate argument, and I want to see how it functions in another context.
Okay, so let's say we want to find the product. So product. This will find the product of that. I'm actually gonna there is a new list already. I need to get into the habit of this. Okay. So let's just say 1, 2, and 3. So it's easier to track. And then list. There we go. So you can just this is pretty much just saying first item, like what to do between items, and it just keeps track of the sum or the product so far.
It might help if you throw a print statement in there.
In here. I don't know if we can do that.
We could,
You probably can.
you could use a name function, I think, instead of the lambda. You wanted to I don't know if we want to do that much refactoring right now.
Let me see. Yeah, you can't. Let's, oh. No, you cannot do. Yeah, yeah, lambdas want to be very simple. It should be just for like a single function type thing, like, yeah. So if you want to add other things, like Adam was saying, you might as well create a new one. We can actually, here, let me try this real quick. We can do it with strings.
Yeah, we can totally do the strings. I was gonna say, we could use a name function instead of the lambda and the reduce.
Yeah. So let's say I want to concatenate the string, and then the product should be the final string. Yeah, there we go. Does that work as a good example? Yeah. Okay. No problem. All right, so that's reduce, and our last one for now is going to be sort, which is also very, very helpful. Sort, I need to update my notes up here. Okay, so let's say I have a list of dictionaries. So I have a list of people. This is from the same example as yesterday. And I want to sort this based on age. So if we say, so there are 2 ways of doing this. We can do, people dot sort. And this one is a destructive method, so it will change the people list, and it will sort it, and it's not going to return a new one, it's just going to change the original. And for sort, instead of just being able to use lambda as this, you have to specify that this is the key argument. So key is going to be the function that you sort with. So this is going to be lambda, let's say for person, and then we want to sort by the person at age. So does this make sense? So it's going to loop through these objects or these dictionaries, and then it will sort based on the age. So if I print out people now, it will print them out in order by age. So 35, 44, and then 49. I believe if I wanted to reverse it, so if I wanted it backwards, so not in ascending order, but descending order, you can say reverse equals true. And this will give it to me in reverse order. So 49, 44, and 35. If you didn't want to change the original, the way to do that is let's say sorted people equals sort, or sorry, not sort, it's sorted. So it's like slightly different name. You give the list that you want, and then you add the key. So key equals same, the lambda. I'm just gonna copy this. There we go. Lambda age, and then I don't want to reverse it, so I can just do this. I will comment this out because this will change the list and oops. Sorted people. Okay. And there we go. It sorts them just to make sure that it's taking the right thing. I'm gonna reverse it. Reverse equals true. And it reversed the order. Questions on this?
So having to call sorted instead of people dot sort is weird. Like, could you also just do sorted people equals that line on 84?
On 84. Well, sorted people, no, so people dot sort will actually change the original list. If you want to not touch the order of the original list and you want to create a new list out of it, then you will use sorted. This comes down to preference. Did that answer your question? Or so I can put this up here, and then I can also, so I can create a sorted list out of it. And then if I just print people, it should show, yeah, so the middle one is the unsorted, so 44, 49, 35, and then it sorts it. Yeah, Jaden.
So just so I can kind of grasp this reason of this lambda is if the only reason you're using this is because we're wanting to use sort, map, and these built-in methods that were made, right? Like,
yes.
Okay, so if you're not wanting to use these, this is kind of, I mean, you don't really want to use this practice, correct? Or is it the only time you use
Yes, yes. Unless you have like a very specific example where you need to have like an inline function just to save space and not have extra code everywhere. Yeah, I would say this is mostly for the use of these functions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. How about we take a little break? Let's take a 15-minute break. We don't have too much left. Yeah, let's answer the questions first. Michael?
I was just wondering if you replaced age with job, is that going to throw an error? Or is it actually just going to work?
Oh yeah, let me show you guys. So if I do it by job, it will sort in order in alphabetical order. So I did the second one. So this last one, the job is life coach. So wait, did I do this right? People.sort.
You have a reverse on.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so this makes sense then if it's reverse. I can also say by name. And then it's not reverse. So it should give, here we go. It gives Alice, Bob, and then Carol. So yeah, you can sort by alphabetical order or by number. Jaden?
Just didn't take it down, sorry.
Oh, okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's come back at 10:55 and we'll continue talking about yeah, stuff. Yeah.